YouTube and on the internet. Is Christianity evidence-based? I would like to set one thing straight first from the beginning, and this is the issue of the burden of proof. The burden of proof in a popular formulation, which is enough for tonight, the burden of proof is the issue. Which side of the argument must provide sufficient amount and quality of reasons and evidence in order for an objective, unbiased third party to decide the issue? And the rule is that the burden of proof always lies on the side which makes a positive claim. And there are good reasons for it. First of all, when you are introduced to something new or something unknown, it would be strange of me or of you to formulate some kind of arguments. It is, of course, on the side which makes the claim to explain and to argue and to give evidence for it. Secondly, it's illogically impossible to believe everything because different claims are mutually exclusive. So whenever somebody makes a positive claim, the default position is to wait in a sort of neutral state and wait until the issue is settled. It is practically impossible to believe everything. You cannot follow every possible claim. It's physically impossible. Therefore, the default position is to wait, stay neutral until the claimant with the positive case makes his case. And last and not least, it's a matter of prudence, because not everything people say in life is true. You may not have noticed that. And it may occur for different reasons. People may be deceived. People may want to deceive you. It happens, sadly. So it's a matter of prudence that you don't jump into somebody's claims just like that, but you wait until the claimant of the positive claim makes his case. Therefore, my job tonight would be simply to refute what Professor Taylor is saying, and I'm going to be doing that, of course, but I would like to do something more. I would like to provide you with some reasons why I think it's a huge and misleading overstatement that Christianity is evidence-based, and I would like to argue for this case positively also. How do you recognize an academic when you first see him? He begins whatever he's talking about by definitions. So let me just tell you about my definitions of evidence, and usually it's usually from a dictionary. Although I would like to propose a more rigid, a more stringent kind of definition of the evidence in comparison with the popular soft definition of evidence, which is similar to what Professor Taylor has just said, that evidence is one or more reason for believing something is true, or an outward sign, an indication of something. I would like to propose to you the definition of evidence which is more in line with the academic background of all of us. So what is evidence considered in science? In order to understand that, let me just say a couple of words about the scientific method, how it works as a procedure. In doing science, you first formulate hypotheses about patterns of observable phenomena. Then you test the hypothesis by collecting and analyzing empirical data. Then you refine the hypothesis, you do further testing, further research, and so on ad infinitum. Now, because of this, I would like to define evidence as follows, that in science, generally, evidence is observable phenomena that reliably and unambiguously points to the truth of a particular hypothesis. What makes good evidence is that it is reliable and unambiguous. What makes bad evidence is that something is, first, unreliable, so it cannot be accepted as real or cannot be accepted as relevant data for the issue. And secondly, it is ambiguous, so it allows alternative explanations for the phenomena, for the data. Now, I would like to present to you examples of this from the field of evolutionary versus creation science. So let me give you some examples for what creation scientists don't recognize as evidence when it comes to the theory of evolution. So evolutionary scientists comes and says, we have radioactive dating. Creation scientists comes and says, radioactive dating gives unstable, conflicting results, and worst of all, it's dependent on the assumptions made by the researcher himself. Therefore, it's unreliable. It cannot be taken as evidence. The evolutionist says we have Darwin's finches, and Darwin's finches are the phenomenon that gave rise to the idea of the tree of life, the common descent of posterior generations from a common ancestor. But the creationists may come and say, this proves only variation within a kind. It does not prove variation that one kind can morph into something else. It does not prove speciation. So it's not evidence for evolution. Then an evolutionary scientist can come and say, well, we have fossils and we have the Grand Canyon. This proves that there have been long-time intensive processes operating. And so this is a proof that the Earth is millions of years old and so on. But the creation scientist looks at the same data and says, this came on as a result of huge forces operating in a very short time, so it may be evidence for a flood, not millions of years of evolution or geological evolution. And lastly, the evolutionary biologists may claim there are homologous structures, there is DNA in all life forms, therefore this is evidence of common ancestry from a common ancestor of all life forms. But the creationist comes and says, no, this may be evidence of a common designer which uses a common blueprint. Why did I give this particular field of examples? Because I think it's more likely that Professor Taylor would agree to my definition of evidence because we operate in more or less the same way of thinking about it. What is Christianity? I defined Christianity